47, Equilibrium 47. He believed that if people could vote by birthright, people would make ill-informed and foolish decisions, since not everyone can be a philosopher. This would then lead to a corruption of the majority, as he believed that voting as skills is only required by knowledge and wisdom, intellect too. Also, one problem with his philosophy is that he did not write down any of his teaching, so every information about his philosophical views comes from secondary sources. Quickstringer. Good read. One important addition it fails to mention is that Socrates feared something much more specific than foolish leaders. His fear was specifically the creation of demagogues. Demagoguery is the act of exciting the passions of the mob against the moderate, thoughtful customs of the aristocratic elites of their times. In modern terms, it is the same mechanism. The political demagogue relies on appealing to the desires and prejudices of ordinary people rather than by using rational argument. Walk in MN. Populism, they call it now. Seoul 1-1. Many do, but it's a bit of a misnomer. Tornado 9015. How so? Populism, noun, a political approach that strives to appeal to ordinary people who feel that their concerns are disregarded by established elite groups. The question is whether he will tone down his fiery populism now that he has joined the political establishment. Support for populist politicians or policies. The government came to power on a wave of populism, the quality of appealing to or being aimed at ordinary people. Art museums did not gain bigger audiences through a new populism. If you think what we have now is populism, or that's what Trump was, look at the popular support of policies that get no traction in D.C. There are fringes outside of the two parties, but the most anti-populist positions are those held within them. If we had populist policies, we'd have M4A, UBI, a much more significant COVID response, etc. Populism is made a dirty word by politicians who want people to think that it amounts to the crazy culture war stuff lapped up by both party bases. But it's important to remember that the majority of voters are actually unaffiliated. Tornado 9015. I'm pretty sure UBI doesn't have popular support. Medicare for All does, but 67% of Medicare for All supporters think they would keep their current private insurance. Support plummets once people understand what these plans are and what they cost. Noldemort. No, that's what morons like Dan Crenshaw say. Gundanium 88. Somebody heard a word on TV and decided to repeat it. Zachary Snow. Why does this sound so familiar? Quickstringer. I was wondering if someone would respond to something like this. I almost typed it at the end, but thought to myself, no, wait, have faith in the brethren. They will immediately connect the dots. Oriu. I don't think it takes much thought to connect these dots. This perspective has been beaten into everyone's head the last 4 years. Quickstringer. 4 years and counting. Don't be fooled or fall into the left versus right trap. BC 4284. The first problem with the left versus right trap is it implies there is a left in the United States. Both parties are capitalist parties, and neither party has a socialist stance. Overall, Biden lies in the authoritarian right, and so do most Democrats. They are just less fat fight than Republicans. We have a far-right party and a moderately right party, and people who are on the left have to run for the moderate right party if they want a chance to be elected. Left or Reagan don't make you left. Silent Femme. The last 4 years of politics have left a bad taste in my mouth. I considered myself left-leaning moderate in the past, but now I'm all but apolitical and have washed my hands with this country's democracy. Crackajack 87. The U.S. seems effed, like I opposed Trump being a Brit and felt anyone was better than him, but seeing Biden up there now, sure, I believe it is slightly better, but still not much of an improvement. Why are you lot always pushing stupid monkeys to the top to run your country? Terminator 025. Because despite having tapestry of a democracy, the U.S. by no means actually functions like one, at least at the federal level. What democratic functions exist are so attenuated that they seem to have almost no measurable effect. Consider that the most probable to win presidential candidates run first through a gauntlet of filters put in place by two corporations. The parties are registered as such. This means that people don't actually get to vote for who they want, but a pre-selected corporate filtered cadre of acceptable options for the existing power structure. Crackajack 87. U.S. loves capitalism so much that it runs the country. This is why I fear unregulated capitalism. Sure, complete socialism is very expensive and hard to pull off, especially if you're a large country, but some socialism is still better than none. Question is, can the U.S. change, or is it doomed to fail into a dictatorship of one kind or another? Top Chef winner. Democracy, the god that failed. Hippie Big Buckle. Also, don't be fooled by enlightened centrism. The demagoguery of Trump is unique. Crackajack 87. Centrists like me are able to view both sides of the argument objectively and without the in-group bias and out-group prejudice that the left and right have. The centrists, if they're smart enough, are in a far better position to know where the true dangers are coming. Hippie Big Buckle. Laugh out loud. Okay, then, instead of simply stating that you're in a position to know better, make a case that is convincing. Krekajeka87. I'm in neither the right or left, so I don't suffer from the group biases that are present in them. I do have these biases towards my group of centrists, but centrists rarely stir up controversy. But then again, that could be my bias on my group. Point is that if you're on the right, you live in an echo chamber where you disregard or ignore information from the left and yet favor information from the right and vice versa. If you're in the left, so a centrist view the issue from the outside and choose which side is being more logical and which side is a danger to society. Simon SATL. The two are not the same, though. King Bevins said the one side. Simon Satethel. The party that elected Donald effing Trump president is pretty clearly insane. Seoul 11. I hate that we got ideologues downvoting far points in a philosophy thread of all things. Also, as far as the election of Donald Trump goes, the Democrats are also at fault for running a candidate who everyone knew was terrible and whose brilliant strategy was to elevate Trump's profile because she thought he would be easier to beat. This last point is a matter of public record. Angel Hunter Deep. Parties don't elect presidents, people do. And to simplify it so much is a disservice to everyone and the kind of thing being warned of here. The 850 killer. Exactly. These people are supported by 90% of the media and almost every major corporation in the world and want to talk about the last 4 years. I remember when lefties raged against the machine. Now they are the machine. Quickstringer. Ah, ain't that the damn truth. Pretty sad stuff. Hippie Big Buckle. No, wait. Have faith in thy brethren. They will immediately connect the dots. That's an excellent technique. I'm going to give it a name in order to help remember it. I think I'll go with the Quickstringer method. SCGH1234. How condescending and full of self-importance. Elkingine. Keep in mind that the moderate, thoughtful customs of the aristocratic elites were things like slavery and keeping women and children as close to property. Moderate basically just means whatever the ruling class does. Of course, his social position was closer to that of the aristocratic elites than to that of slaves or women. Crackerjack 87. Moderates are actually liberals, but the U.S. effed up the names and called the left the progressives liberals, when true liberals are center, and they often stand for freedom to choose, free will, free speech, the right to bear arms, etc. They often stand for equality and acceptance and often vote between the parties at whoever fulfills most of these liberal rights. The opposite of a true liberal is authoritarianism, and that's what the far right or far left take freedoms away. So in many countries that are left-leaning, there are new hate crime bills that force you to censor yourself in case you offend someone, and a lot of liberals are against these bills because it takes away our freedoms. Luda Morris, SLU. Liberalism didn't exist in ancient Greece. Socrates feared that regular people didn't have the wisdom of aristocrats and would rock the boat, and the boat, in this case of ancient Greece, was filled with slaves. Similar arguments are being made now that populists are dangerous because they don't have the wisdom of the ruling class, moderates, that oversee a massive system of prison and debt slavery. Whatever system is in place at any given time will be regarded as wise by the people benefiting from it. Crackerjack 87. Oh, you meant at the time period, not today, my bad. So moderates then were pretty much the uneducated, while in today's politics, those same people, I'd argue, are the diehard party supporters who vote for their party rather than view what their party stands for. It's like a gang fight where no one is safe. Elkingine. What's moderate at any given time is the perpetuation of the status quo, possibly with minor fine polishing. This is something beneficial for those in power that also tend to be the people with access to the most expensive education, both then and now. Socrates as a free man whining about demagogues upending the system, which included the subjugation of slaves and women, is about the same as free white centrists today whining about populists and Bernie bros and how society absolutely needs to follow the wisdom of the aristocracy and maintain prison and debt slavery. Crackerjack 87. I'd like to point out that I'm a centrist and populist views are dangerous as they're cult-like and often based on flawed ideas that sound good to a certain group because it benefits them, but for everyone else it's bad news. But I have nothing against Bernie, but then again I'm a Brit and Bernie speaks with European politics, so to me seems fair. And as for prisons and slaves, the UK does things better, and although prisoners do work here, it's to teach them new skills and keep them busy, and is often used in charity work like repairing old broken bikes, shipping them to poor third world countries, so I can't really comment on the US side of things. Less Drama 2604, cancel culture, smiley face. Post-apocalypse. Democracy is also one step away from tyranny. The majority of uneducated voters never gets it right. Now we are to believe that voting by phone is a good thing, like we are voting for America's top artists. Gopher Space. The problem with restricting votes is that there's no objective measure of competence that hasn't already been abused. If you were to somehow come up with a measure of IQ that wasn't absolutely loaded with baggage, everyone smarter than you will want you out of the voting pool. There isn't a form of restriction that can't be used against you. GM 123. Also, intelligence isn't benevolence. The smartest people can still be self-serving. I do sometimes wonder if a demonstration of understanding of the electoral system might be a reasonable prerequisite to voting, but I worry any exclusion is a slippery slope. Go for space. After thinking about this a while, I remembered the mirror test. This is probably the best we could do. If you punch the mirror, no votes for you. Post-apocalypse. Making an effort is a pretty good objective measure. Getting off the couch and hitting a voting booth, reading the content, candidates, provisions, and getting your voting center right is also a good measure. Why should my vote be canceled out by someone who does not take 1 minute to research a subject or candidate? You see this all the time with dead people winning votes. And someone explain how expanding the ease of voting will make it better. Hidden 47. Let's restrict voting. Okay, on what grounds? Who decides? This or that measure? Okay. And who are you to decide that? Well, maybe we should vote on it. All of us? No. Just the right ones. See where I'm going? Also, modern democracy has little to do with ancient Greece. This isn't to say that the critique about demagoguery isn't applicable today, which I think is comparable to populism. Anyhow, globalization and pluralism seem to have made democracy the only viable solution to the problem of the use of force in a society, at least for now. Hut J509. Because not everyone needs to expend the same effort to vote. If everyone had the same job, the same boss, the same schedule, the same transportation, same lines, same administrative hiccups, etc., sure, your argument might have some merit, as everyone has the same bar to clear. That's not the world we live in. Go for space. Voting is a fundamental freedom. By fundamental, I mean that if you remove someone's right to vote, you remove that person from society. We want everyone to buy into our system. We want everyone contributing to our system. We don't want to be surrounded by people that envy us and don't have anything to lose in a country with readily available firearms. Post-apocalypse. Voting is a fundamental responsibility and privilege bestowed upon individuals for living in a specific area or state. There are clear distinctions. If it were a right or a freedom, you could practice it anywhere. I can't go to Texas and vote Governor Abbott out of office and sign the petition to remove Governor Newsom. That is not how it works. I also cannot vote for appointed Secretary of State. The privilege cannot be taken away based on sex, race, color of skin, religion, and socioeconomic status, and in that sense, we are all free to practice based on specific limitations. Those nuances are what make us equal to exercise the same privilege as those within our specific area or jurisdiction. While I am for the participation, I prefer those to understand the responsibilities of knowing the issues and not voting because of corporate interest, propaganda, or latest paid endorsement from a YouTube star. Go for space. Me too. My point is that there's no way to tell who's who. We have to make sure everyone gets to vote because there's no way to judge competence at this level. Lopsided Plane 3319. It's hard about what should be under the voter's purview and when should an executive or legislative body make the decisions. For example, money on maintenance. No one ever wants to pay for it, so voters likely would get it wrong. Legislative bodies get it wrong many times also. Executive citizen groups generally get it right, at least the recommendations, if not enough money. Quiet. T. I mean, people below the age of 18 can't vote, and it's very easy to argue that it's being abused in the sense of politicians have no reason to care about the welfare of children unless the parents care. Yet not many people argue for abolishing the voting age limit. Go for space. Yeah, I think the big difference there is that nobody disagrees that there's a point where children aren't competent. 16-year-olds drive and work. It's weird they can't vote. Quiet T. But not many would agree that a mentally ill person would be better fit to vote than 15, 14, or 13-year-olds. And yet they can. In fact, I don't think many responsible people would deny that a politically educated and interested 15 or 16-year-old is more wise in voting than some 40-year-old whose only knowledge of politics comes from conspiracy theories and QAnon. Sea Shark. How is that worse than tyranny or oligarchy? Deleted commenter. You guys already voted for America's top TV personalities without voting by phone. Making it easier, more fair to vote won't make any difference in that regard. Post-apocalypse. My point exactly. This is not a D versus R thing. Both are subject to constituents within the same demographics. Deleted commenter. Yes and no. Disclaimer, I'm not an American, but my wife is. Statistically, it seems that voter suppression is usually better for R, which is why they tend to promote that. More voters in general seems to be good for D, which is why they work so hard at getting people to vote recently. ED Ventures. Isn't this why the Electoral College exists, to try and avoid mob rule democracy? I don't understand why people want it removed completely. At least replace it with something better to avoid the current flaws, but just don't remove it entirely. Monsanto Breath. But it practices demagogues appeal to masses' dissatisfaction by the supposedly sober governance of a society turning to crisis. If the adults in the room were actually doing their job, they'd have stopped it. Dan the Man 616, he believed that if you were to write your thoughts down, they would eventually be used against you, and you would not be there to defend yourself, unlike if you said it in person. And if you have ever written something dumb on the internet, you know that's true, LOL. Stroke my axe. He also says that the results of ill-informed would be electing popular but unskilled rulers, while the skilled but superficially worse ones would be dismissed. Thelonious Cube, that could never happen. Aphrosia. The problem is that now he likely has to deal with the things he didn't even say being used against him. At least he could carefully craft the words that he chose to write down. Hearkening. The things Plato wrote down. Socrates is a victim of his own deep fake. Yaland un yale. But he's not alive anymore, so he doesn't give a darn. My other throwaway 90. Maybe he's looking down on us from the celestial spheres and shaking his head. Trucker on the run. I hope someone in Tartarus picks up that phone because I called it. C. Westions. Only the hemlock knows for sure. Reasonable delay 4740. Can't give a darn nor darn a gift. Dracula Milquetoast. Don't always trust everything you read on the internet. Socrates. That guy has a point. Also, he actually said I'm pretty great. Plato. Slapbox. I find it shocking he'd care about that. ZHIBR. Well, he was eventually killed because of it, so it was not exactly an idle worry. W. Bruce 098. Seems legit, but didn't he end up being forced to commit suicide in the end anyway? Alien ANAL. Quick, someone check Socrates' Twitter. Minor key. Dang, that's a unique and legitimate issue from the time of early written word. Never would have considered this for people whose lives are barely, if at all, recorded. The dangers of writing your words down. Probably still face those with the social media area and modern communications, but to be among the first to have to consider the consequences of writing your thought down. Cade the Trickster. And he's right, but this way has also a major flaw. Who decides who is wise enough to vote and who isn't? I think that method of voting has more potential for corruption than allowing everyone to vote. I agree that people need education in order to vote, but our problem with many democratic countries, for me the U.S., is that our public education is terrible. The U.S. only requires a semester of politics and a semester of economics, when it should be required every semester of high school like math and English. Soup BUT. Realistically, we as citizens vote on very little. We elect who we think should represent us, i.e. selecting who is the wisest, and vote for or against policy. CHIBR. The problem is that the characteristics advancing the chances of being elected are mostly different from the characteristics that would make a good representative for the people. J4 JJJJ. Which is why I think directing voter is a better method. I've been wondering what it would be like to elect officials who write laws, but their job isn't to pass the laws. Merely write them in such a way that a very high number of citizens, greater than 80%, maybe higher than 90%, understand the wording of the bill. If so, it would then be voted on by the populace directly. I know there's flaws in every system, but IMO, a democracy, requires understanding of laws being passed, and legalese is impossible to read sometimes, difficult to read the rest. ZHIBR, that's a form of democracy, though. So hard to teach. For me, the U.S., that our public education is terrible. The U.S. is seemingly being designed to go down the path of demagoguery. I understand my language is probably less absolute than it should be, so this must be intentional, yes? Education controlled by the state would naturally be built around not being a threat to said state. Reliance on the government to keep you educated about the rules of the government is supposed to follow seems silly when you take into consideration their fondness for rules for themselves. K the Trickster. For sure, intentional. I had a professor doing a statistic study for a court case about No Child Left Behind. In the end, one of the politicians that was there who voted in No Child Left Behind admitted it was designed to end public schools and worded in a way that sounded like it would be a benefit to public education. Reasonable delay 4740. This would be a very useful reference to have. I'm searching for a citizen, but I'm not sure if the results are related to what you're referring to. I don't suppose you could provide some more search terms to help me search for this. K the Trickster. It was in California. I believe it was a school in Delano, but not 100%. Basically, the government has a team of people that go over the test scores and determine if the school is met the standards of No Child Left Behind. They said that school wasn't, so the school hired 3 different teams to go over the numbers, and all 3 came to the same conclusion, that the school was in the green. They then took them to court, and after everything was taken care of, my professor talked to the politicians there and informed him of a flaw. No Child Left Behind doesn't have a cap, so if a school is at least 98% pass rate, they still have to increase that percentage, and if they somehow make it to 100%, they have to maintain that or their funding gets taken away. He responded responded saying that was the idea when they pushed it through. Reasonable delay 4740. Ah, I see. Thanks for clarifying. JetsFan83, do you have a source on that semester statement? I mean, our state has a mandatory 1-year personal finance class and a 1-year government class. Also, that may be a U.S. minimum education, but the state sets education rules, so it would be very hard for the U.S. to try to change things. Also, I agree that we should have those classes, but let's be honest, it's not like our kids and adults don't have thousands of resources at their disposal right now to learn for themselves. One huge reason that everyone glosses over it is that people just don't care.